You're listening to the Adventurous Weirdos podcast by Watcher DM. Learn more at watcherdm.com or come join our Patreon at patreon.com/watcherdm. Stay weird.
I'm Austin Holm,
I'm Gabriel Hernandez.
and we're Adventurous Weirdos here on the Adventurous Weirdo podcast.
That's what we're calling it.
We're calling it that. We
Working
decided.
title.
Yeah. If you have a better one, let us know.
In the comments. If
In
there's
the
a comment
comments,
section
get some
near
comments.
this thing, or you can just yell it in the street. I think we're okay with that.
I am often in the streets, and I hear the yelling.
That's where we do our best work. Yelling in the
true.
streets,
That's
half clothed, mostly insane. And yeah, this is our second episode. So thanks for coming back. If you're coming back, if you're new, we're Watcher DM and Quest Giver Games Limited, and we make products for tabletop role-playing games.
Yeah, we make tabletop role-playing games.
We make tabletop role-playing games.
Yeah,
and products for tabletop role-playing games. It's like propane accessories, or TTRPGs and TTRPG accessories. And my favorite alliteration of or enunciation of TTRPGs now is titterpigs.
Titterpigs?
Yeah, I think titterpigs is. We should just say we're in titterpigs.
Yeah.
And people ask, "What business are you in?" I'm gonna say titterpigs.
Mm-hmm.
And if they ask much more about it, it's gonna get real weird.
I feel like if somebody told me they were into titterpigs, I would assume they were holding Molly and knew where the good dance music was at.
Those are true. Those are true statements. Yeah,
possibly. All right.
I'm into titterpigs, and I know both of those things. All right. Well, so our first episode, I think, was a lot of introduction and who, what, when, where, and then we got distracted and went off on a weird tangent.
I love it when podcasts do that.
Pretty great.
Yeah.
This one, I think we have kind of a little agenda.
A little bit.
I want to talk about a couple of things, and the first thing I think we're going to try and tackle is balancing a hobby, the TTRPG hobby, known for its obsessive nature, known for its all-consuming timeness.
It's whiz-biz. You build a tiny world. That's wizard shit. And wizards, alone in the tower with the books.
How do they make time for family?
How do they make time?
How do they make time for jobs?
How
do they make time? How do we wizards make time?
That's whiz-biz above my hat grade.
I do not have a big enough hat.
Yeah, I'm
a
ball cap wizard. I need at least 2 more points before I'm getting into making time. But yeah, I don't know. Let's hear your thoughts on this. How do you make time? How do you balance?
Man, I don't think I did.
Yep.
For years, decades, in fact. So when I started in role-playing games in D&D 2nd edition, back when I was 12, 13.
Sure.
And it was kind of nonstop, aggressive, time-consuming until I was probably 20.
Yeah.
At which point I think I stopped full stop to try and hook up.
Yeah.
I basically was like, well, I could roll dice or I could chase tail.
Yeah.
Tail won for a while.
Sure.
And then once tail, there was some kind of recapture back into the scene and was playing a lot of kind of varied stuff. We were playing Vampire the Masquerade and Cyberpunk and Shadowrun.
Tail, Vampire the Masquerade.
Live action Vampire the Masquerade is tail chasing material.
White Wolf, you're doing the Lord's work.
You're doing the Lord's work. You got a 14-year-old Gabriel laid at least twice. But yeah, so and then later in life, when I got married, again, I kind of stopped. Actually, I didn't spend time with anybody but my wife and my kids, both of whom were, or her kids, who was stepkids. They were both pretty young when I got there, and so I never really I didn't introduce them to Dungeons and Dragons proper, or really any of those. What I introduced them to was miniature painting, because that was the thing I could justify. It's art. It's arts and crafts,
sure,
technically. So we painted up some orc boys,
okay,
and had a pretty good time with that. And it wasn't until after I was divorced that I got back into
Role playing.
role playing games
Yeah.
with family and with friends and stuff. And even I think even now, am I balancing it? I don't know. Ask my partner, right?
Yep.
Like I'd make her play so much D&D crap with me. We play Troika together. My partner is Alicia Yo, who
Does
is
our
our
layouts.
does our layouts and has been our editor for over a year now.
Hmm.
And she also was with she did the actual play, the Troika actual play
Hmm.
videos on the YouTube channel with
Headstrong
me.
cute, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Headstrong Cute, Demon Hunter. Pretty fun. It was a really fun series to do with my partner doing like a solo adventure. But yeah, and she was not really. I think the if my gimmick is to just convince my partner that it's fun to do and do
Yeah.
it with them.
Well, it's interesting when we were kind of talking about this. Like, I wasn't sure whether you meant like balancing, playing TTRPGs with spending time with your family, or whether you meant balancing publishing TTRPGs with spending time with your family. Because I got to say, I don't think I could hold up my end of what we do without the support of, without my wife in the background going, you can do it. Like, this little 80s montage coming out of her mouth every time I'm like, I don't know, it's hard, these people aren't getting it. She's like, you're the best around,
Nice,
nothing's ever
nice.
going to keep you down. uh so
Chelsea is a gem. She's
so
given us some of our best
yeah.
things
Yeah.
throughout this whole publishing experience. Actually, Adventurous Weirdos, Weird Adventures for Adventurous Weirdos is a Chelsea Home original,
Hmm.
fresh decanted saying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's good with the zinger.
good with the zinger.
But I don't know, I mean, for me, like, I feel like when I started getting into TTRPGs, titterpigs, when I started getting into titterpigs, uh I was probably around 6 or 7, and my mom was dating a dude, a cowboy named Dusty. Uh,
That sounds like a game right there.
yeah, well, Dusty, if you're out there, I hope you're still rolling, bud. But he had a son who got me into D&D,
Okay.
and it was very much the kind of thing where, like, I would be with my mom. Alex was his name. Alex would be with Dusty for the weekend, and it would be like, okay, go to your child's space and play D&D, and we'll see you in 2 days, and like, and it was great. But like, I didn't.
Mom and her boyfriend are gonna balance over
Yeah,
here. You guys go
right.
balance
Some
over there.
titter pigs going on over there in the other room. But gross. Um, I feel like I didn't really become like obsessive about it until I went to boarding school.
Hmm.
And
That sounds like a place to become obsessive about anything.
anything that will transport you away from doing mandatory rugby with boys 2 years older than you is a good thing. I think, it kind of became a safe space for me in those years, and I've had a awful time in high school, but you know I feel like kind of having a group of friends who you could play with and imagine and create and share those kinds of dreams or fantasies. I feel like is just, it's such a psychic steam vent of just like, no matter what's going on in your life, it really, you know to me it was always the thing balancing. It was like, I've got all of these hard things happening over here, and over here kind of weighing that out, I've got my games. And it's interesting actually, because when you and I first met and you were running Pixels and Pagans online, I was also going through a hard time. I was just moved out of Vancouver. I was in Kelowna, and the company I had moved there to work for was kind of slowly decomposing around me. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this isn't going to work out. But knowing, kind of having that weekly escape event of like, okay, well, Al Hazrat is going to ride on Friday, and you
He
know,
hasn't gotten Fireball yet,
he
so
has,
look out.
yeah, he just reached level 5. Watch out, world.
Yeah.
I feel like those kind of things, like, it's 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 a form of magic. It really is just how you can kind of, how your troubles can melt away for a few hours at a time, or how you can kind of use those alternate selves as ways to protect the real you when you're going through stuff. And I don't know. I think it's a big.
So you're, and I think it's interesting you say that. Like, I think the other way to look at all this, right, is like how can you use titterpigs to balance,
Hmm.
to find balance, like kind of in your life,
Hmm.
right? Where it's like if things are not great or they're especially tough, you feel like you are kind of powerless. Finding a fiction, a storytelling mechanism that you can find power in
Hmm.
can be a very balancing and healing kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think just the act of, it's kind of one of those things about the game that, like, we focus on the die rolls and the character creation, but ultimately, you're at a table with your friends and you're telling stories.
Yeah.
And I think, from caveman days, I think that's one of the things. It's like, the night is vast and dark and horrifying, and the campfire is warm, and we're telling stories, and we're together, and we're sharing a dream.
Yeah. I think that's, it's another interesting, I think, holdover from our experience. We've both been playing for long enough that, like,
A while.
random games on the internet
Hmm.
was not,
No.
there was not a thing. Um, but that's kind of a thing now. You can plop into a game and be in a room with strangers and be playing, and it is a vastly different landscape. It is a weirdly very, very strange
Yeah.
and different.
Well, I think too, a lot of the, like, there. I notice online you kind of have like a bunch of like grognards sitting around being like, oh, these safety tools and X cards, and it's like, I don't like all this, namby pamby feeling bullshit. And it's like, my guy, the game has changed. Like, this is not you. Like when I was in high school, and clinging desperately to the psychic raft of D&D. It was me and my three best friends, and occasionally we'd have a fourth dude drop in for a few games.
Right.
Like,
And if
and
somebody stepped over the line,
you would just say, "Fuck off."
yeah, you'd be actually upset about it, and
Yeah,
you would get into a fight, and we did. Like,
yeah.
did anybody not have some hard feelings while playing D and
My
D with their
third edition player's handbook broke because I threw it at my roommate.
right?
Yeah,
Right. And like when you're a child, okay, yeah, you're gonna have feelings anyway.
yeah,
But like
yeah.
in D&D, like the opportunity for the DM or one of the players to step out of line
Uh huh.
and fuck up in a way that's going to cause an emotional rift
Hmm.
is not. It's so much higher than zero. It's higher than
Yeah.
50%. Like you run that risk. I was running a game not even that long ago. It was like 2018 or something.
Hmm.
And I was running a Norse campaign, and I had handed the reins over to my friend Ani, and she had taken DMing. It was her first time DMing. I was super excited for her. And I was playing a character who had a certain understanding of how the world worked. And so I was playing that. And she got really upset with me because she thought I was expecting the world to actually work
Work
that
that
way.
way.
And she was like, I'm the DM. And I was like, no, I understand. But my character doesn't know that that's how the world works. He's expecting this magical thing to work this way. And so he's going to operate as though that's going to work,
Hmm.
despite it being actually putting him in danger.
Hmm.
Because that's how I play a character. Like
Yeah.
if they believe something, they're going to believe it until it's proven otherwise.
Hmm. And when you're
Uh,
friends with somebody, you can kind of just explain that to them, and
but in the heat of the moment, no.
yeah,
We had
yeah,
she was yelling at me, and
yeah.
voices were raised, and hackles were raised, and I was like, whoa, okay, cool. Like,
Hmm.
and then after the game, it was an intense, hard conversation to have about what had gone wrong, where the rails had gone off, and it was her first time DMing, so she was
Mm.
she was elevated
Yeah,
anyway, kind of in that blood pumping moment of
that's a hard.
storytelling. It's hard. And I think she felt a lot of pressure. I was her DM, and I was in her game, and she felt like I was challenging her authority, and I
Mhm.
was like, oh, I get that. Like that makes perfect sense. Like, good call on pushing me down. You didn't have to yell. I was already. I was willing to let my character die. I don't really.
Yeah,
I'm not that. And this is the other thing I think that balancing titterpigs. One of the critical parts of balancing titterpigs in your life and having a life that involves this hobby is acknowledging that it's a game
yeah,
and that the stakes couldn't really be lower.
no.
Like one of the things I think that I see a lot is the vitriol about players being late or not showing up or how hard it is to get 6 adults around a table or 4 adults around a table.
Yeah.
And the reality is that is a manifestation of the fact that life stuff is important. And
Elf games.
elf games rank pretty
Eh.
low on the list of priorities if you kind of have your priorities straight.
Mhm.
If you happen to have a bunch of leisure time and you can coordinate that and organize that and arrange that, fantastic. But I feel like having the expectation that your adult friends are going to be able to swing
Mhm.
your consistent coordinated weekly schedule or biweekly schedule or whenever you've got the whim to run, it's not realistic. And there's a lot to, I think Mike Shea has kind of a drop in drop out, the Sly Flourish, uh he's got kind of a drop in drop out way of running his games where it's like somebody could make it this week, okay, we play without them. I've always had kind of an open door policy in terms of if you can't make it, try and give me a heads up. I understand emergencies happen. We'll put your guy in a box for the weekend. I was like,
Mhm.
we don't need a narrative to solve it. It's a game. We can get through this without feeling like their feelings are hurt. I think the downside to that is that that player will miss some of the games, but that's the call you have to make. Because as a DM, can we continue playing without when people do call off? And there's a limit to that, right? It's like if you get down to one player,
Yeah.
two players,
Well,
we're
it's
called off
interesting
on account of that.
too. Like, I feel like the fifth edition mode of like where it's a little more character driven, like OSR tends to be very like, there's gold in the hills. Go get the gold. Kill whatever is between you and the gold. 5e tends to be a little bit more like, well, your brother has burned your village to the ground, and you got to track. And so, if the character whose brother is the big bad evil guy, if they're not there for a session, that's a whole new kind of a headache, right? When you have those more character driven games.
Yeah, no, it definitely can be. But I mean, that's that's a good opportunity to spotlight somebody else's stuff too, right? So I think the risk in those kind of character driven narratives where the story is so tied to the character's backstory is that somebody with a hyper compelling backstory or a really visceral threat in their backstory or in their character's kind of narrative takes a lot of air in the room over their stuff, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't and end up getting to spotlight very much of the other characters' backgrounds and what's going on for them. Maybe you should have that open door policy just to provoke that. But I think the most important thing is not to take it personally. If 3 of your players can't show up and you don't have a game because of it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, thank them for giving you a heads up. If they gave you a heads up, if they didn't, encourage them to give you a heads up next time. But realistically, just saying, hey, thanks for giving me a heads up. No worries.
Mm-hmm.
Literally everything is more important. It's fine. I understand. I'll be ready for the next one. Do a little prep for the next one. And you should be ready to go. It should
Mm-hmm.
be easy. So I think it's hard as DMs because we feel like there's more of a load on us to do that prep work. But then again, you've still got. It's not like you lost it.
Yeah.
You know,
Still good for next week.
yeah, you just do a little refresher before your next session. Anyway, so yeah, I think that's I don't know. That's kind of how I take balance in titterpigs. There's kind of a variety of ways to take it. Obviously, the most important thing in your life should be your family,
Yeah.
your friendships, things like that, and then entertainment, including Dungeons and Dragons and TTRPGs, should probably take
It's low on the
lower on that
pyramid.
list. I'm not telling anybody how to live their life. If titterpigs are the biggest and only thing in your life, maybe I don't know. Maybe you're a teenager. Maybe you're lonely, and this is just your thing. Like this is what you've got, and great for you. But for the rest of us, yeah, you know,
Are we should check in on our audio situation here and make sure we're
I don't know. Your
yes, yeah.
looks fine.
Yeah, we're good.
Cool. Yeah. So what was our next? What else were we going to talk about?
We were going to talk a little bit about Memento Bombix Mori, I think.
Cool. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we did a play test of this.
Yeah.
back in 2022, 2021,
It's been a
22.
minute. Yeah,
That was 22.
22 it was. Yeah, it would have been springtime of 22.
The planet was Luxor 6.
Yeah.
The vegetation had grown as thick as a mantle on a normal planet had what would be.
Shifting plates of
What
iron
were the
hard leaves.
what were the bugs saying? They were chanting
Oh, Linomia was the name of
Linomia.
their mutant god king.
Yeah, an ever growing grub
Yeah,
god king
of the
thing.
catter people who ruled
Yeah.
the canopy surface of this world.
And above in the red sky floating not the first upside down black pyramid.
Yeah, well, I think it was a right
It
side
was
up.
right side up
We
initially, that's right.
the directionality of the pyramid changed several times over the course of play. I also think it's probably the adventure that changed the most after playtesting. I feel like we had to reconfigure it a little bit more than some of the other ones.
Yeah.
Um,
So what was the process on that? What was your, because I know we started with it was birthed from the Lepidoptorium
yeah,
in The Divisible Man.
yeah. So in the Divisible Man, part of the sort of the backstory is that Da Vinci, the wizard, has he owes the Dreaming King money, so he's cut his sleep out. So he doesn't sleep anymore. So he doesn't need his bedroom. So he's converted his bedroom to a butterfly collecting room because that's what he's using his extra 8 hours a day on. And Lady Lowry, who is fantastic, just a super cool person,
Yeah.
uh,
Amazing artist.
amazing artist. Go check out the Insta. She put together a drawing of the monster in that room, which is a moth emperor who has been pinned to the wall, and he tries to psychically convince the party to free him.
Yeah.
Uh, that drawing, I feel like, was just it's two very diminutive guys with torches kind of looking up at this giant moth mummy. I think we both looked at it when we went, that's got to be the cover
It's got to be the cover of
of
something.
something. We got
Yeah.
to figure out a
Well, because
way.
we had already bought the cover for Divisible Man from
Yes.
Lurk. Lurk loves you.
Yeah, Russ Moreland.
Russ Moreland, he's up here in, I think he's in Kelowna, or
What?
yeah,
I didn't know he was
he's a
Canadian.
Whistler. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, he lives like,
In BC.
yeah, right up the road.
I had no idea.
Yeah, no, I watch his YouTube. He's got a fantastic Instagram. He's like always reeling.
That dude is also super talented. He's got a
Super
great
talented, super
and he did
cool,
a great cover for us.
amazing cover.
Um,
Geez, actually, so
you've got both.
this is hilarious. So you can pick these up. One of the products that we made are
Yeah,
these notebooks. They're
the
bullet,
titterpig accessories we make.
yeah, Titterpig accessories. And so the cover of this one is the Divisible Man cover. This is the
This
Russ Moreland cover,
hmm
and then the back of it is literally
the Lady
the Lady
Lowry.
Lowry
Yeah,
moth mummy. God, it's so cool.
it's super cool. But yeah, we were talking about how that was way too good to be an incidental illustration of one room in this massive house. We wanted to put it on a bit of a pedestal and give it the cover, and so of course we wrote something completely different, as is our style. But yeah, I think for me, Memento Bombix Mori came out of, I mean, I guess three things, including Lowry's amazing art. But yeah, there was. So I think we mentioned last time how I moved to Mexico in the middle of COVID,
Right.
and yeah, there was a lot of death in my life and lots of people's lives at that time, and certainly, in Mexico, there's not always the resources to do things the way we do here in Canada. Which, I mean, I know people in Canada were kind of like, like these COVID rules, they're too much, and trust me, go down to Mexico and you can argue about the happy middle afterwards. But yeah, I mean, it's tough to lose people.
Yeah.
And and yeah, I mean, doing something about death, about bringing something out of death, I feel like felt really important to me at the time. And the other thing, which is more of a gamist kind of need, was I had just downloaded Skyrim,
Okay.
and you know how you
Was like the third release or the fifth
oh
release or something,
god, I think honestly, I think it's probably the fourth time I paid for Skyrim.
right?
Um, yeah, those bastards, they know me too well. But they had just re-released Skyrim for the 12th year running, and you've played it, obviously. Everybody has, I think.
Everybody's played
No?
Skyrim.
Yeah.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, you know how you go through a Skyrim dungeon and you get to the end and you beat the guy in the tomb and you go to the wall and you get your magic word and then you pull a lever and it opens up a secret door that spits you out
Right at
right
the
back.
beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, boy, these dungeon builders were sure considerate when they put this together.
Yeah.
Just in case that Walking Dead bastard you just murdered wanted to go for a walk, they put a secret door at the back of the tomb so he could get a little fresh air. Um, but it's ridiculous, like it's insane, and it's especially insane because the construction of all of those dungeons is it's vault construction. It's there's something valuable in the center,
Right.
and I'm going to keep you out. But a dungeon is just medieval word for prison.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep you
I'm
in.
going to keep you in, and so I feel like I really wanted to do a dungeon where it was like getting in is not so bad. Like getting in is one thing,
Yeah.
but getting out is kind of, like that's the hard part. So, uh,
I distinctly remember playtesting that and realizing almost too late that that's what was happening.
yeah.
So I remember we were like, "Oh, cool, we made it to the sarcophagus.
Hmm.
This is great.
Yeah.
We're gonna beat this." And then the whole thing. Well, I guess spoilers for
Spoiler alert for a
yeah.
module that isn't out yet, but once you
Everything changes.
yeah. Well, it's I think people if you're watching this, you're probably a DM who's might potentially want to run such a module.
That's fair.
So the idea is you're on the canopy of this world. You have a self-erecting ladder that you climb up to get to the bottom of the pyramid. You climb up into it. You get to the very top. You find Bombix Mori's cadaver, and as soon as you take it from his tomb, the pyramid flips. So now you're at the bottom, and you have to crawl your way out. And also importantly, in the original playtest version, we just had it. You get to the top, and then somebody else tries to steal your haul, I guess, or they try to steal the cadaver off you.
Right.
But I think the way we did it now is that one of the biggest monsters in the dungeon, as you go in the first time, as you go up, that monster is pinned under rocks. But once the
Right.
temple flips, he's free.
Right.
And that kind of becomes the boss fight. Is you had a chance to kind of maybe meet this guy and have a little chat with him earlier, but
Is the Atlas moth, right?
yeah, the Atlas moth,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
He's holding up the arch, and then when you come back, the arch is reversed. Like everything's reversed, so he's
yeah.
just like free. Yeah, that was a good. God, it's a good bit.
I we used
This is
the
something we did too in you did in
privatized.
privatized hell.
Yeah, and both kind of came out. So I think it's interesting. I was thinking a lot around the time too about like that kind of they say the quantum ogre problem. You're familiar with this?
Oh yeah,
Where you have two doors, and whatever door the PCs go through, that's where the ogre is, right?
right.
But to make meaningful choices as a player, as a party, you kind of have to have the knowledge going through. And so in privatized little hell, we did, the top floor has a glass ceiling, which fits with the corporate punnery that we riddles through that adventure. But also it gives you a chance to see the first floor
Hmm.
before you even start the dungeon. You know the layout of the first floor, and likewise in Bombix Mori, Memento Bombix Mori, I wanted people to you know have a chance to check everything out in kind of low danger mode. And then it's like, okay, but now you're escaping. You know the landscape, but it's changed and it's more dangerous, and you can hear the noises coming from above that, something's loose up there. So
Yeah,
um
that's cool. That's it. Yeah, I think that's a thing that isn't often like you don't see that in a lot of dungeon design
yeah,
where you're exposed to the thing that's scary up front in a way that's like okay, like
inoculatory or
yeah, like I
yeah.
know it's there. I can inspect a little bit. I can do some kind of investigation as to uh what its capabilities are. and then like have that information on the way back through, or even be able to circumvent it, I guess,
Hmm.
in some cases, or change the nature of the fight, which I think is in Privatized Little Hell. You kind of took that and went, I think, maybe even farther, right? Where like the actual in the dungeon, you can do things to modify the encounters on the way out.
Yeah. Well, in Privatized Little Hell, like everything is kind of, I mean, there are combat encounters, but it's a lot more social on the way through because you're disguised
Right,
as a devil going into this Archduke Mammon, the Archduke of Greed. You're going into his kingdom.
right,
And so, you're meeting these people as, salesmen. They're hawking D10 cantrips in exchange for people's souls, making warlock deals out there. And
yeah.
but once the
The
alarm,
warlock sales floor.
yeah, and everything is kind of a parody of human greed until you try and take a prisoner out of hell, and then it's like, okay, well, these are they're not playing at being human anymore. They're not mocking the material plane. Now they are violent, evil, looking to grab and control and rend. And
Yeah.
um,
So there's some other cool. There were some other cool things in Memento Bombix Mori that I wanted to talk about.
yeah,
Schizocrol Observatory.
schizochrol is a great word.
Such a good word.
Neither of us knew it existed before we started.
That's true.
Yeah,
I think the question was, what do you call it when it's shaped like a bug's eye,
yeah, like a fly's
like a fly's
eye
eye?
and
And
schizochrol.
one Google later,
Yeah.
Schizocrol came out, and now we use it wherever we can.
Yes, I do go out of my way to say schizochrol sometimes. I like that though. I feel like in fantasy, like, certainly I my vocabulary comes from reading Terry Pratchett mostly. Like, like I feel like and even more so, like I remember I was reading Lovecraft a while ago, uh and he's always describing things as cyclopean architecture, and I
Right.
was like, "Oh, that's so cool! It's so evocative." I'm picturing these cyclopses building these things at these like inhuman scales, and it doesn't fucking mean that at all. I found out just a couple of weeks ago, cyclopean architecture means when you don't mortar the stone. It's finally joined, uh, like it's
Oh, interesting.
well machined enough that it fits together without mortar.
So, like most of the stuff in South America,
Yes,
they're really ancient.
precisely.
That's funny.
Japanese woodworking is technically cyclopean, but I had
Huh.
no idea about that, and so
Yeah.
to me, I hit this word and I'm figuring it out through context, and it kind of is. It's a gateway to imagine. It's an invitation to imagine. What is cyclopean architecture, right?
Yeah.
That sounds so.
What is schizochrol?
Yeah, what is schizochrol? I don't know, but there's a white witch moth in Memento Bombix Mori who lives in a schizochrol observatory.
Which is cool too. The character, I think the whole scene of that white witch moth in the observatory is
Hmm.
just such a cool. Like, I'd love to paint that.
Yeah,
It just sounds so.
well,
It's
you
so visually evocative.
you may get a
I'm,
chance.
I'm going to probably get a chance to.
Yeah. And I like to, I mean, I kind of mentioned earlier how, the whole thing is kind of about death, right? So as you are making your way through the tomb, you're finding these five different, it's the Memento Bombix Mori, or his name's not Memento. Bombix Mori is the moth god emperor of this, he's the dead emperor of this planet. And he's buried with all of his highest lieutenants, his four highest lieutenants.
Right.
And they're all sort of the stages of grief. There's like, you know, she's bargaining, which is why she's sending you out into the thing. She's trying to cut deals with the players. She's trying to, get them to fulfill her own little designs and make deals with them and
Yeah.
goad them with trinkets and yeah. Um,
That's so cool. Uh, One of the other things I know in that adventure that I really liked was the symbolism used on the different doors, where it's kind of like
yeah.
it's not language, it's pictographic.
Hmm.
It's kind of hieroglyphs, like moth hieroglyphs, basically.
Yeah.
But something that I don't. Again, you don't see that too often in adventures where it's like, here's a symbol,
Yeah.
deal with it. Like, yeah, like I feel like the closest most adventures come to something like that is where they're like, it says this and this in Dwarven,
Yeah.
above the
Yeah.
door.
Well, that's just it. I mean, it's the character sheetification of like like roll an intelligence check to decode this is a terrible way to deal with a puzzle.
The character sheetification.
Yeah.
of Dungeons and Dragons. That's a good.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, but
Yeah,
it's I think it's true. I mean, it's that thing of like, oh, we've hit something. I got to look at my character sheet
yeah,
to figure out what tools I have to deal with this,
right.
which is not a good way to deal with puzzles. And also, not a good way to deal with puzzles. I feel like is the thing where you have to solve them to progress, because it's one of those things where you're like, how do we move forward? That's completely off your character sheet. I feel like giving somebody some pictograms and saying, these are hints. You don't need to get it. If you just go, readings for nerds, and I'm a barbarian, and I'm gonna
Break down the door.
break down the door. I kick that pictogram right in his smug little face.
Yep.
More power to you. But if you want to play if you're Indiana Jones, then maybe you can kind of look at it and you're like, oh, didn't we see some of these on the first floor? And you start to,
Start piecing it together.
yeah, and those, I think you said to me a little while ago, those kinds of aha moments
Yeah.
for players, that's, I feel like, where not most of the fun, but a great deal of the fun is to kind of go, oh, if we, this door then must mean this. And if we take, like those kinds of like where you start getting it, that's a great feeling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's that. Yeah, it's that. It's that thing that happens in video games when they unintentionally or kind of indirectly teach you
Hmm.
how a mechanism works,
Yeah.
and you realize not just how it works, but the implications of how it works, the
Yeah.
unintended consequences and side effects, or like the underlying nature of why it works that way and how that impacts things that are not related to what you just learned. It's kind of distant connections. I really love that kind of stuff in game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For me, I played, God, what is it called? Outer Wilds recently.
yeah, yeah. You talked that game up
I,
pretty good.
a revelation. Like, I feel like there were so many moments playing that where I had like my game brain on,
Hmm.
and then you get the answer and you're like, oh shit, like that's a real, like there's, I don't want to spoil anything in case people haven't played it. Go play it, it's good. um
Spoilers for Outer Wilds. Go
Spoiler
nuts.
for, well, there's one bit in it where there's a planet that's covered in hurricanes, and whenever
Hmm.
you hit a hurricane it shoots you back out into space.
Oh,
But
okay.
one of the five hurricanes on the planet rotates in the other way, and it can shoot you down to the watery core of the planet, somewhere the internal
Oh,
tides of this water world won't let you go. And it's really only, you're kind of looking at it and you go, oh, why is that one different?
yeah,
Like it's, I think Hank Green said it. I might be wrong, but I think it was Hank Green said, the birth of science is, huh, that's weird.
yeah,
And putting those little things in there that kind of get people going, and then when you start putting it together and you're just like, holy, I've been butting my head against this stupid water world for an hour now,
yeah.
and if I had just looked at it and thought about it, like, I coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the tricky things to pull off as a DM
Totally.
is like presenting something that it exists in the world. You're like, okay, you're exploring, you see this effect, you
Hmm.
see this symptom,
Yeah.
of some underlying thing, without first of all getting too excited and telling them what the thing is,
Yeah.
because that's really easy to do. Is like, no, no,
Yes,
no, it's really
I've
cool. It works this way.
blown a couple puzzles that way.
Definitely want to go buzz that way. But also providing enough information, enough context clues that over an amount of time they can
Hmm.
kind of get it
Yeah.
and click. That's like really really difficult to do as a DM in a homebrew game.
Hmm.
I think it's equally difficult or even more difficult to do in a published adventure, because you kind of have to get the DM on board there too.
Yeah.
You have to like get them to that place of understanding where they feel like, oh, okay, I see what's happening here, and I see that I'm supposed to use these
Hmm.
as kind of shadow puppets
Yeah.
of what the players can eventually understand. It's a tricky thing to pull off. I think you do it particularly
Oh,
well,
thank you.
but it is extremely hard to do.
Yeah, I feel like there's just, you know, puzzling too feels like it's such a key part of titterpigs.
Titterpigs.
Titterpigs. Puzzling just seems like such a core part of the experience, but done wrong, it kills games.
It's like the most hated.
Yeah.
Like I think most people are like, I don't like puzzles
And even
or
just the thing
riddles
of
or
like, oh
fucking
yeah,
anything.
I'll Google children's riddles and I'll pick, like I need a children's riddle where the answer is sand for my sand temple. Like, it's
Right.
just the most it's one way to do it and it works and people, get a kick out of it. I think Andrew Ferguson, was that him or you who ran that? I think it was Andrew who ran that game where they had a nilbog giving answers and then the players had to come up with a riddle for the answer. I
Oh
thought
yeah, that was Andrew.
that
Yeah, that's very Andrew.
that was very good, I
Yeah, that
thought.
was pretty good.
Um,
That's cool. Well, speaking of titterpigs that are not 5e,
yes,
we have played
many.
many, but I think my favorite over the last that we've explored together
Yeah.
has definitely been Troika.
Yes. Troika is amazing.
Let's talk up Troika for a minute. I want to give Daniel Sell some good
You
love
gotta
and the
go.
Nelsonian Arts
Sure.
Council. If
Uh,
I'm gonna brown nose anybody, it's gonna be that
it's
guy.
gonna be the Melsonian people. You guys are great. I love what you're doing.
You're pretty darn good.
I liked it best when you put your books at 90% off, so even my broke ass could afford them. That was super cool.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
But yeah, Troika's amazing. It's so quick to teach. In fact, you really don't need to teach it. You can just be like, start rolling dice.
Yeah,
Let's go.
there's actually I think 5 or 6 sentences at the beginning of the book
Uh,
that describe character creation,
yeah,
and you just do that, and then you're
yeah.
like, okay, we'll figure it out from here.
I think the one thing that kind of that our group doesn't do enough is you can spend luck points to increase your damage. I don't know if you guys know this, but
Yeah, I do know that.
yeah,
Yeah,
I found out after having run probably about 7 sessions of Troika.
yeah,
um, but Troika's amazing. The adventures are amazing. It's the character backgrounds are fun. My wife's first character she rolled, Pierce Hawthorne, a zoanthrope, is an aristocrat who had himself lobotomized to become more animalistic as part of a fad. And I remember she rolled up this character and she was like, "This is some bullshit." Like, my
I got
guy,
a guy who doesn't have anything.
yeah, naked, brainless man. Like, I don't like this. I don't want to play this character. And then about 30 minutes later, she was like running and jumping and climbing, and she's like, "I'm an animal." Like, it's
This is the best character ever.
yeah, Pierce Hawthorne has been a great terror to many. I think in the Puppets of Beagle Mouse playtest,
Yeah,
old Pierce was running around the swamps. Um, but yeah, really, really great game, Troika. Great energy, very evocative. Like the spell list is evocative, the backgrounds are evocative, the monster list is evocative. Everything is just so loaded with invitations to imagine things.
that's true. Yeah,
Um,
and yeah, I think that's the sell.
mhm,
That's the game. It's why it's so cool.
mhm.
Um,
I also feel like Troika 2, there's an essay, and I don't know off the top of my head who wrote it. Maybe we can subtitle it in post or something. But my aesthetic is pathetic. Have you read this?
no,
It's interesting. It's a guy talking about how like the aesthetic of D&D is like you are great heroes on a quest to save the world and you're the fated chosen ones and you rolled a 1 and you dropped your sword on your toe cuz you're an idiot. Like,
yeah,
like it's kind of that combination of like, immaculate grandeur and yeah, you're just a bunch of fucking idiots stumbling in the dark like
yeah.
and
We
Troika,
accidentally killed the hostage.
yeah, Troika handles that so beautifully. I think there's such a great kind of like, well, I just showed up to have a couple of drinks and then an adventure happened kind of vibe to it. Like, I think one of the first ones we played was House Party. It was a third party adventure. We did Blank
Right.
Mange and Thistle out of the book, which
Hmm.
is all about getting to the top of a
I never played
hotel.
that.
You didn't?
No, I never played Blue Munch on Thistle. You played it with Alex and
And Andrew and
Andrew and
Chelsea.
Chelsea, and I wasn't there that
Were
night.
you in for the House Party
I
game?
was there for the house party game.
Which that was pretty good. I mean, I really like that one especially because it does dovetail so well with the starter adventure.
Yeah.
And it's got some great bits like some silly sphinxes and yeah, the third party content for Troika is a rich landscape.
Well, and I think what I've found is that Troika kind of is such a simple system that you can kind of take anybody's third party content and kind of slap it in with very little work. Like,
Yeah.
I think I grabbed Bakto's Terrifying Cuisine, which was designed for OSC, I think.
Yeah, or maybe Lamentations. I'm not sure,
It
but
might
in
be
it they do
Lamentations.
have a Troika version of it. But
Coming out soon.
oh, is it not out
It's
yet?
not out yet.
Ah,
They have the Troika backgrounds.
uh huh.
You can get those.
Okay.
So I've got those. I pulled those
Uh,
out. But then there was no actual Troika adventure. They're
no.
still working on that. So I just went ahead and I statted all the things. I was like, Dunzo, this is easy.
Yeah.
Like it's so easy to slap things together for
Well, it's interesting that you
that
mentioned
system.
Bactos actually, because I mean, Bactos. What is it? Bactos Terrifying Cuisine, I think is its name. Full name.
Yeah, by Roll for Tarask.
Yeah, just a fantastic module. We actually
Fantastic publisher.
fantastic publisher. We wrote a blog post about it, kind of talking about our playtest of it and how we got a lot of use out of a good. We had a gong soundboard that we'd bong every hour and
Yeah.
have Bacto kind of yell at you over the PA system, so to speak. It was a lot
That
of
was
fun.
every 10 minutes, wasn't it? It's like
Yeah,
every time
something
you
like
move.
that every time you move.
Yep.
Um, but so Roll for Tarask also does Brave Zenith,
Yeah.
for which we did Brave Revenger or Brave Revengers. Yeah.
Revengers
Revengers
disassembled.
Disassembled,
Yep.
and which we are now porting into Troika. Uh, and
And I think we're gonna do the rest. I think we should just do the rest of our adventures over for Troika as well.
like all of them.
All of them. And not like Druid of Ravenhenge or
Hmm.
none of the stuff that you didn't write. Basically, I don't think. Maybe
Yeah,
some of the stuff that like I think Hurricane Deathbot would go really good as a
Hurricane Deathbot
Troika
would be a great
adventure.
Troika adventure.
Tempest Love would be a good Troika
Sure.
adventure.
Yeah.
So just to name a few that you didn't write that would
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
a good port. Tomb of the Vampire General would be a fantastic
Could
Troika adventure.
could be.
Um, but then we've got all the stuff you've written, which is like, Kiss to Build a Dream On, Trouble with Dreams, Wake Up Sheeple. Those would all be fantastic Troika adventures. Moon Elves Masquerade would be a good Troika adventure. Doom Desert almost is a Troika adventure.
It's
It's like
it's a little unhinged
it's
in the.
super right. It's just right on that
Yeah.
verge. It's a Troika adventure that got accidentally written for 5e.
But that's the interesting thing, though, is I've been looking through Revengers Disassembled, and like it's very tied into the system of Brave Zenith, right? Like
Yeah.
Brave Zenith has a mechanism in it where it assumes that you're going to have a break in the middle of your game, which more games should do.
It's
uh,
actually a really good point.
and during that break, your characters are having an in-game meal, and so there's a lot of rules around food, and there's like four different ways to be poisoned in Brave Zenith. So going through it and trying to translate it into Troika, it's like, well, what does it mean to be emetically poisoned in Troika? Like, is it just the same to be like, yeah, you're throwing up, your character is nauseous, like if you don't in character throw up once every 10 minutes, you get a negative to whatever. Or is it, do you come up with something else? Is it like test your luck, or you can't heal eating provisions, or is it, do this or do that? It's interesting how much the system kind of, it's like that thing people say about 5e, where they're like 5e is always about combat because the rules are all about combat, right?
Yeah.
Um, whereas like, in Troika, combat rules are relatively small.
They're
Uh,
just skill rules.
yeah, the skill, the kind of the like, I want to use my relationship counseling skill is, it's really only, less a damage table. That's basically the combat system is the same as like the relationship counseling system or the lock picking system or the swimming system. Uh,
Yeah, it's just the skill system. I think the two there's kind of two systems in Troika.
mhm.
Like I with except so luck and stamina are like a system. Skills are like a system.
Yeah, Buck's kind of in between the two a little bit.
Well, luck interacts with both of them, I think,
Yeah.
like at some level. And then there's the inventory system.
Hmm.
And the inventory system is actually how I would deal with emetic poisoning. So I
Oh,
would just
interesting.
put emetically poisoned in your inventory.
You have
And while you have this, you cannot
queasy
heal.
belly cramps.
Yeah, you can't benefit from you can't use food to
Yeah,
cure stamina.
that's smart. That's good.
That seems like the way I would handle it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's flexible to that kind of idea, I think, through that. Also though, like one of the things I think this is one of the things about Troika that I don't think I've ever seen like us for like not a lot of people homebrew it, but it's so homebrewable.
Yeah.
Like, there's no magic items in Troika out of the box per se.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have any. There's nothing in it that's like, oh, this is a fancy ass thing you can
There's a
get.
list of like 16 items that are all basic equipment.
Exactly, but none of them are basic. They're all super weird.
Ruby, Lornjet,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Um, but like magic items in Troika could be wild,
Yes.
absolutely wild, bizarre. Or they can be kind of just mundane,
Mm-hmm.
but also effective. Like Headstrong Cute wields a silver sword. She has to because that you need that to hunt demons. If you're gonna kill a demon, you have to be using a silver sword. It's not a magic weapon; it's just silver. Um, but providing a magic item that lets you smell the color blue
Yeah.
at 500 feet, and you go
And be,
hunting for the blue wizard beagle mount, or
yeah,
whatever. Like,
that's awesome.
and that's kind of like that flexibility in the rules, and that's exactly why I was like, yeah, I would just use the inventory system to
Yeah.
stick it in your inventory. If you want to get it out, roll to get it out.
Test your luck to puke up your stomach cramps.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a system there for handling it. It's just not that. Yeah. Anyway,
Interesting.
that's kind of how I would do
Yeah.
it.
I think there's a bit of an interesting kind of thing underlying Troika where D&D very is like, you are an armed, heavily armed, poorly humored, person. You kill things for a living, uh, or for honor or duty or the safety of the world. But you are a red hot Swedish murder machine on some level if you're playing D&D.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas I feel like Troika is a lot more like kind of like, you're stumbling in, is you're here. Like Blank Mage and Thistle is very much like you're going to a party. Like uh,
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that's some of the adventure context. It matters, right? Like, so the adventure Blamage and Thistle is written to be in town. You're going to a party. It's like you're going to the specific location.
mhm,
If you play the Big Squirm,
mhm,
that one's like you're coming to investigate something,
mhm.
and a bunch of other people are investigating things in town,
Yeah,
and that's like the context. And so you might get into fights with some of the things,
yeah,
but by and large, like, it, combat is a failure state.
yeah,
Um, Now that said, I've played Troika where combat was not a failure state. Combat was kind of like the expected state of what was
yeah.
going on.
Well,
I think,
Puppets of Beagle Mouse is kind of like that.
yeah, and we played an adventure. It was one of our early adventures. I don't remember who was running it, but it was like we were out in a desert and like dealing with there was a bird guys in a tower, and we had to take them out.
Luke Gearing's
It's Acid
Acid
Death
Death
Fantasy.
Fantasy. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And so Acid Death Fantasy has a more kind of almost Dune esque
yeah,
danger around every corner.
yeah. You're shivving dudes and feeding them to the sandworms, and
Yeah, very kind of combat centric, blood and murder centric, um, which is super fun. It works well with that system. It feels deadly, but it is deadly. Like, that's Troika has kind of got that characteristic to it where
mm,
you may
you're
not be
gonna
long for
lose a
this
few.
world,
Yeah,
and if you die, it's a
yeah.
good thing. Character creation is so easy.
Yeah, it's the line from Shrek. Some of you may die, and that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
Back. Cool. Well, yeah, so no promises, but fingers crossed, sometime in 2024, we'll be porting the majority of our library over to Troika in some fashion or another. I know we've got Longbear Valley.
Longbear Valley is mostly in the can.
I think we've got Divisible Man
Hmm.
is mostly in the can.
Yep.
I've just started on A Kiss to Build a Dream on. And we've got some others that we're slowly grinding away at. Probably be doing a bunch of art for. I'll be doing a bunch of art for. And
You should do some little cartoon dudes like you did for Revengers Disassembled.
yeah, I may crank out some just cartoony little character things for some of those. That'd be
Yeah,
pretty fun.
that'd be dope.
Yeah. But yeah, do we got anything else we wanted to?
Well, I think we should just mention, since we spent like a good portion of this, probably 30 minutes of this, talking up Troika, that they're soliciting right now for manuscripts. If people want to go check it out, they've got a project called, I think, 1 in 5 or 1 to 5.
Yeah, the 1 to 5 Troika.
They're looking for adventures. in the system set in the city of Troika that are dangerous and moody and not conceptual art like is the stumbling block that's slowing me up. Everything I make is like, oh yeah, they'll be 12-foot ogres and they're skinny and they have like a film projector for a face and they're like holding dudes down and like fucking projecting their war movies into these guys' minds and then I stop and I'm like, that's some more conceptual bullshit, Austin. That's not what these people are looking for. But maybe you have what they are looking for, so I suggest you go check it out.
Yeah,
Gentle
definitely make
listener,
it and look out for our eventual your eventual submission
which they will surely accept because I am the greatest ever,
for sure,
for
for
sure.
sure.
I know you never doubted.
Yeah, I
I do the doubting. Yeah.
yeah, you're the doubter among us. Anyway, yeah, so excited to see what comes out of that. I know one of them just came out recently. What was the most recent?
The most well,
What
they've
was
got Whale Graphics Warehouse. I
Will
think they've
Graphics Warehouse was the
announced, but it's
first.
not out yet. I don't think.
Right, right.
But looks good. I mean, I've seen the cover art, and it's
Yeah,
a mood.
it's looking pretty fun. So very excited to see where Troika
Mm.
goes in 2024. I think we're going to try and hitch our buggy to that boat a
Yeah.
little bit more so than we did with 5e.
Yeah, well, the problem with 5e, as you've said to me many times, is just so many people are out there producing low quality content for free that if you want to produce high quality content for money, forget about it. You know what I mean? Like
It is
it's
very difficult to compete in an ocean
yeah,
that is already full
yeah,
of
yeah. It's a
fish.
big pond full of big fish.
Yeah, it's a big pond full of big fish. The 5e marketplace is saturated with free content, and I think, of course, I think our stuff is good. Like I think quality wise,
I'm
we put a lot into it,
gonna be an asshole and say it's better than 90%, 95% of what's out there.
and sure, but like then I go and look at like how things are actually run, how 5e is actually run, and what is the job of the DM, and what actually happens. And you know why our stuff is mostly better?
Mhm.
Because it's brief.
Yeah,
Like the reality is that for 5e, for me, less is more.
yeah,
If you took the time to shorten the thing down to the usable chunks that I need and leave the cruft off the table that I don't need,
yeah.
the text blocks and the egregious GM binder formatting that we're also, we have a bunch of
We've
that too.
we've we've done some of that.
We all started in the same cesspool. Um, but yeah, like I think the two pagers were our answer to that.
Hmm.
And what's hilarious about this whole publishing scene is that nobody looks at a reduced amount of content and goes, "Oh, there's a bunch of value there."
Yeah. Well, it's
That's
it's not a reduced amount of content. It's honestly there's probably more content in Long Bear Valley than in most 16-page GM binder modules. It's just that it's denser.
right,
But that's a hard sell. It's hard to say, hey, this is only 2 pages long, but I assure you there's more in it than a lot of 20-page modules.
right.
It's easier just to fill space saying like, oh, the Quatlu of Morgenthal cast the ritual of Kazarak on the itch things of Morgus, and you're just like, well, that fucking means nothing. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
And while it may seem like an invitation
Yeah,
to imagine,
but it's not. It's just meaningless proper
it's
nouns.
just meaningless proper nouns.
Yeah,
And I think that's the red herring there because they seem like the same thing up like on the surface. As a writer, it
yeah,
can be very easy to be like, oh, and then oh, the rock the Shah, and then you're like,
yeah,
that's so cool and evocative sounding, and then you say it to somebody else, and they're like, what did you say? And you're like, rock the Shah, and they're like, that's not a real word,
yeah,
and you're like, what's the name of this cool, Tiger King or whatever,
yeah.
and they're
Let me show
like,
you the picture
why
in the
didn't you
book.
say fucking Tiger King, dick?
Yeah,
I would have Tiger King is evocative. I could make up a Tiger King, land of the Tiger Kings. It's
yeah.
cool. Yeah. Anyway,
Always go for nouns over proper nouns.
go for
That's
nouns over proper nouns, and go for adjectives over
over nouns.
nouns. Um. All right. Cool. Well, I think this has been a successful episode. We made it to another 55 hour, like almost an hour now
Yeah.
of holy crap. So we're gonna seal this one off. We're gonna sign, seal, deliver,
Yep.
and we'll see you sometime in the future. I think for episode 3.
Yeah. We're both wearing our Watcher DM hats today. Come back for episode 3. Maybe we'll both be wearing Watcher DM shirts.
Or
No
diapers.
promises. Or diapers. We make them all. Check out the shop, watcherdm.com. Thanks for coming.
Yep.